Under a sky we can't see, a machine we barely remember keeps a promise we barely deserve. For nearly half a century, Voyager 2 has been running on the fumes of the analog age. Crystal oscillators, tape memories, a brain measured in kilobytes, racing 12 billion miles into the dark. It was supposed to last 5 years. It learned how to last a lifetime. Then, something answered. At first, it was only a tremor in the noise floor, a heartbeat pulsing every 744 seconds, too regular to be random, too stubborn to be a glitch. RF engineers in the Deep Space Network leaned closer, the way you lean toward a whisper you're not sure you're meant to hear. The carrier was there, thin as a spider's line, but braided into it, cadence, structure, a rhythm that didn't care what we sent, how we swept the frequency, or how we flooded the channel. It kept time with something that wasn't us. Rewind just a moment. August 20th, 1977. A Titan rocket lifts from Cape Canaveral, and a car-sized craft slips free. Jupiter's bands, Saturn's rings, Uranus rolling on its side, Neptune's wind-torn blue. A tour that rewrote textbooks before Voyager 2 ever saw the edge of the sun's breath. And yet the real story is what came after the postcard. Decades of silent work at the frontier, sampling plasma, counting particles, tasting the magnetic seams where our star's influence thins and the galaxy presses back. By November 2018, Voyager 2 crossed the Heliopause, call it the veil if you like, at about 119 AU. Beyond that not-quite line, the solar wind falls quiet and interstellar space begins. No drama, no fireworks, just a different kind of pressure on the hull, a different kind of silence in the headset. The instruments kept talking, the signals kept arriving, 16 hours late and faint as breath on glass. You don't notice endurance while it's happening. You only notice when it falters. July 21st, 2023. A routine command sequence nudges the high-gain antenna by 2 degrees. On Earth, that's a shrug. At 12 billion miles, it's exile. The beam misses the dish. The data stream goes dark. Inside mission control, there is no shouting. There is procedure. You audit. You simulate. You trace the file history and find the ghost. An outdated parameter set, obediently executed by a spacecraft that always does exactly what it's told. The attitude control keeps the body steady. The instruments keep sipping the interstellar sea. Only the bridge home is gone. Except, not entirely. Under the static, a carrier, the faint heartbeat, refuses to die. And then, that pulse appears. Every 744 seconds, engineers do what engineers do. They accuse their own tools first. They revive legacy decoders older than some of the staff. They peel back bit streams and timestamp the corruption. They map what remains by hand. And what emerges is not garbage. It is geometry. Binary markers fall into a lattice that tessellates as hexagons inside hexagons. A recursion that feels like nature and yet has no business living inside Voyager 2 telemetry. The timing is worse. The clock tags come back out of phase with the probe's own oscillator and out of step with Earth's round-trip light delay. Not by much, just enough to slide sideways, as if the packets were assembled from a parallel timeline and stitched onto the carrier with careful indifference to our expectations. So the question pivots. If the fault isn't in the transmitter, the oscillator, the software, or the path through our atmosphere, what's left? Space itself. Call it a field, not a wall. Imagine that the heliopause is less of a border and more of a membrane, thin and active, with properties we hadn't needed to model until we sent a whisperer to knock. The raw logs begin to look like the probe signal entered an environment that did not merely scatter or absorb, but interacted, shaped, echoed, as if the message brushed against a surface that could feel. Inside the Deep Space Network, access tightens. This is not conspiracy, it's muscle memory. When you don't understand what you're seeing, you shrink the circle until the noise of opinion drops and the signal of evidence can be heard. Files get new stamps. Memos learn a new code. V2X. No one says encounter. No one says contact. What they say is, we need to be sure. And the debate blooms in the cracks, as it always does when nature fakes intention well enough to scare us. Plasma physicists point at turbulence, at magnetohydrodynamic instabilities that can carve periodicities from chaos. Signal analysts point at the primes braided in the 7.44-second cadence, at the old scars of the 1977 wow signal, at fast radio bursts that mock our models with clockwork mischief. The pattern is regular enough to tempt and weird enough to warn. When your instruments suggest structure at the edge of known physics, you're not at a wall. You're at yourself. Meanwhile, the practical problem remains. Find the probe. The team designs a blind broadcast, a sky-wide shout, timed to the moments when Voyager's onboard systems listen, even when the antenna is mispointed. You don't send paragraphs, you send verbs. A command to rotate, a command to phone home, a command to trust the gyro over the stars for one more breath. It will take days to know if the whisper lands. There are no live updates at 12 billion miles. There is only patience and calibration and coffee that loses its heat while you wait. Between those hours, someone, no one will later agree on who, proposes something that feels like heresy. Don't fight the rhythm, knock back with it, not a message, not words. A metronome aligned to the pulse, a soft push on the carrier every 7.44 seconds as if to say, "We see the tide you're making in our signal. Can you feel this one?" It is not a conversation. It is a calibration across a boundary that might not be a boundary at all. And here is where the story tightens, because this is the part that can make you look foolish if you're wrong and reckless if you're right. Do you attempt dialogue with a phenomenon you cannot describe without metaphor? Or do you log it, file it, and walk away until your math is better? Philosophy enters wearing a lab coat. If the field is structured, if it is active, if aware is more than a poetic crutch, then intent matters. So does consent. We forget sometimes that humility is a scientific instrument. What happens next is small enough to hide inside error bars and large enough to change a life. The blind broadcast goes out, the DSN listens. Hours stack. Then the carrier swells. Just a hair, just enough to pull above the noise, and a fragment of telemetry arrives that should not be able to arrive with the antenna where it is. Orientation data matches the last known attitude. Power levels are viable. And nested in the craft is a block of bits that fits no table in the spacecraft's design, but fits the hexagonal recursion the forensics team has been sketching on whiteboards for weeks. 6 layers deep, then a seam, then 6 again. A motif, not a sentence. Did we cause it? Did we catch a fluctuation and mistake our timing for control? The honest answer lives where science lives, in the gray. But the effect is repeatable enough to chase. Over the next cycles, the team rides the 7.44-second crest, easing the blind commands into phase with the pulse. The goal is prosaic: walk the antenna back 2 degrees, but the experience feels anything but. Each tiny correction is a petition and a test. Each tiny response is an argument for patience over pride. When the link finally locks, it does so without drama. There is no alien manifesto, no revelation. Just a stream returning to nominal, a familiar waterfall of numbers that mean temperature, voltage, rate, angle. The room exhales in the way only rooms built. To deny tension can exhale. Someone writes the time on a legal pad and underlines it twice. Someone else deletes a draft email that would have sounded like victory. The spacecraft is healthy. The bridge home is restored. The mystery remains. Because the pulse doesn't vanish. Even with the antenna reacquired and the telemetry framed correctly, the 7.44-second harmonic still threads the carrier. Quieter now, as if distance moved, as if respect was paid by both sides. The hexagonal lattices still appear in background blocks no subsystem claims. They are not random, they are not ours, they are something like a fingerprint on the window at the edge of the room we just reopened. There are proposals, of course. Build a daughter mission, not to fly past the veil, but to dwell in it. Equip it with transmitters that can sculpt carriers like clay, with clocks that can be detuned and retuned, with magnetometers that can dance to a rhythm instead of sampling through it. You don't learn a language by shouting nouns, you learn it by listening to grammar. The hardest sell in exploration has always been patience. For now, Voyager 2 continues. Power margins tighten year by year. Instruments are triaged the way old sailors furl sails for the last time. The golden record still rides along, our strange audition tape for neighbors who may never press play. The spacecraft that was never meant to go this far is still going. And every 16 hours or so, we hear from it and are reminded that the universe rewards perseverance at least as often as it rewards brilliance. So what did we knock on? A boundary with agency? A plasma skin that sings? A structure in the interstellar medium tuned by fields we haven't tamed? Maybe the veil is not guarding anything. Maybe it is greeting everything. Maybe it does what all good thresholds do, make you decide how badly you want to cross. Here is the part that matters, whether you write code for antennas or just watch the night sky between apartment roofs. When you meet the unknown, you will be asked for your posture. Fear will say, close the door. Ego will say, kick it down. Curiosity, the kind that built a car-sized emissary that could still be alive out there, will say, knock. Then listen. We could have labeled the pulse a nuisance and filtered it away. We could have insisted our models were complete and forced the data to fit. Instead, for a moment, we allowed the universe to be a partner in our experiment. We let the rhythm teach us when to speak. We let humility be the antenna and patience the power supply. And something, call it field, call it foil, call it neighbor or nature, left its fingerprint on our signal and on our story. What happens next will not be settled by a single broadcast, a single paper, or a single late-night shift at a console. It will be settled by the old disciplines that got us here: measured courage, disciplined listening, careful craft, and the refusal to confuse mystery with magic. The cosmos is not obligated to explain itself in our grammar, but it keeps inviting us to learn. Voyager 2 is still out there, a steady pulse in the dark, keeping time with a rhythm we did not expect to find. Somewhere beyond the maps, a veil we once drew as a line has begun to look like a living seam. And if seams are where new things are made, then perhaps we are not just at the edge of interstellar space. Perhaps we are at the hem of an answer. If you're the kind of mind that leans toward whispers, keep leaning. If you build, build carefully. If you listen, listen longer than is comfortable. And when you knock, because the story of our species is that we always knock, remember what the oldest machine we have in the farthest dark just taught us. It isn't enough to send a signal. You have to be willing to hear one come back different